Hey, I'm Sophia, and when I was a kid, me and my family always took trips to the beach. I can still remember how much I loved building sand castles and playing with those cute little crabs. However, one day, I suddenly felt dizzy and noticed that I was completely covered in rashes and hives. I got scared and ran to my mom to tell her that something was wrong. However, my throat was so swollen that I couldn't even speak. My parents saw that I was suffocating and rushed me to the hospital. Luckily, the doctors were able to save my life. But a few hours later, I got diagnosed with solar urticaria, or sun allergy. It means that whenever UV light rays hit my skin, I get rashes that burn like fire. To make things worse, my sun allergy is so extreme that I can't leave the house unless it's nighttime, or unless I'm wearing a big sweatshirt that covers all of my skin. You can imagine how my whole life changed in an instant. The worst thing was going to school, because all my classmates could play on the schoolyard while I had to stay inside my classroom with the curtains closed. I felt so lonely, and I couldn't even go to the cafeteria to eat with my classmates because it had such big windows and no curtains. Suddenly, I was a complete loner without friends. I guess that's why I hated school, but life at home wasn't perfect either. I had to spend a lot of time with my evil brother. We hated each other, and he always told me that my sun allergy was ruining our family because we couldn't go camping or go to the beach anymore. I also had nightmares where I tried to run away from the sun, but it would follow me into our basement. Once the sun rays hit me, rashes would form on my arms, with blue slime coming out of them, and then I would slowly melt like a snowman on a beach. But most of the time I spent laying in bed crying and wondering if any guy would ever be willing to date a misfit like me. I was about to give up on life, but then my brother had his 13th birthday. My parents asked him if he had any wishes, and he said his only wish was to go back to the beach. My parents got mad at him and told him to be considerate of my sun allergy and to stop talking about the beach. But he started crying, pointed at me, and said I was an evil vampire that was scared of the sun and tried to suck the blood out of our family. I remember feeling so terrible afterwards that I went to my mom and asked if she could bring me to a foster home because I didn't want to be a burden to our family anymore. Luckily, I have the greatest mom in the world, and she said that she would never ever leave me because she just loves me too much. I guess that's exactly what I needed to hear. Because the next day, I decided once and for all to stop being a victim of my sun allergy and to finally take control of my life again. I joined an indoor hockey team to make new friends. I bought a telescope and took my family out to the beach and watched the stars at night. And I stopped thinking of my sun allergy as something bad that happened to me. And instead, I started to think of it as something good that happened for me and that made me become a stronger person. Now I'm in college and people here are much more understanding. Some even think it's cool that I have a sun allergy. And there was one cute guy who approached me and said he always wanted to date a good-looking vampire like me. And I've also decided that if I should ever get married, that it will be during a solar eclipse, because that would be so romantic. I guess it sounds crazy, but at this point in my life, I'm truly grateful for my sun allergy. It taught me that the events in our lives don't control us, but that it's all about how we react to those events. The first 2 years after I developed my sun allergy, I couldn't stop pitying myself, and I spent every night crying myself to sleep and wondering why life was so unfair to me. However, now I've realized that complaining about things you can't control doesn't make sense. It's a waste of time and energy. Instead, I tried to only focus on those things that I do have control over, like studying for school or having a good time with my family, playing board games and making jokes. I just want to thank you for listening to my story. I hope you learned something from it.
Hey, I'm Peter, and I recently changed schools because my dad found a job in a different city. I suffer from social anxiety, so the idea of making new friends petrified me. But it got worse. My new school based 50% of their grades on oral participation. Before, I had always been an honor student with top grades all my life because I wanted to go to an elite university someday. But there was no way I'd be able to talk in front of my class. And because I didn't want to become one of the bad students, I came up with a plan. On my first day at my new school, I took in a letter which read, "I'm Peter. I have mutism and several problems with my hearing." I gave it to the teacher, and after he read it, he asked, "Can you hear me?" Of course, I could hear him perfectly, but I acted like I didn't understand him. That's why I leaned forward so that my ear was almost touching his mouth, and when he asked again if I could hear, I nodded. Then he gestured to me to sit down right at the front. I was so nervous, my heart was almost jumping out of my chest. But it was worth it. Everyone believed I was mute and deaf. After that, my teachers only gave me written assignments, and I didn't have to do any PowerPoint presentations or answer questions in front of my class. But there was one problem left. My gym teacher, Mr. Gary. I could tell he didn't believe I was deaf or mute, but of course he still had to treat me respectfully, or otherwise someone could have accused him of mistreating of a retarded person or something. But one day, he crept up behind me and yelled, "Boo!" I jumped and let out a little scream. Afterward, Mr. Gary talked to me inside his office. He said he'd called up my old school and learned that I could speak and hear just fine. That's why he asked why I was faking being mute and deaf. Well, I told him everything about my social anxiety and how I didn't want to fail my classes. Luckily, Mr. Gary turned out to be really cool. He said he'd keep my secret and even told me I was one of the most badass people he knew for pulling this off. Wow, maybe he was right. Maybe I was badass after all. I understand that some people would argue that I should face my fears and practice my communication skills instead of avoiding to speak. But they don't understand that my social anxiety is so bad that there is no way on earth I would raise my arm and speak in front of my class. And this way, instead of getting an F for my oral participation, I'm only graded on my written work. And that's 1,000 times better, because it will allow me to go to Stanford or MIT someday. And pretending to be mute and deaf isn't easy either. Imagine someone makes a really funny joke in your class, and you have to hold back laughter. It sucks, and it makes you feel very isolated. Especially because I can't talk to the other kids in school, because I can't risk them telling the teachers that I'm only pretending. But there is one boy who I trusted enough to tell him my secret. You should have seen his face when I told him I could speak perfectly well. My parents know all about it too. I had to tell them because there was a parents' day at school. I couldn't risk them telling my teachers the truth. Luckily, my parents were okay about it. They agreed that my grades were more important than answering questions in class. When they found out why I'd done it, they were really supportive. They didn't know about my social anxiety, so they signed me up for a public speaking course to help me overcome my fears. The first time I went, I broke down in tears when it was my turn to speak. It was so embarrassing. But everyone was really kind, and slowly I'm getting better at talking in front of other people. Maybe one day I'll be able to tell the truth at school, but not yet. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe to this channel.
Hi, my name's Maya, and I want to tell you about the time I made the biggest mistake of my life. My dad died when I was little, and it took my mom years to start dating again. She said that I was all she needed to be happy. But I always knew life would be better for her if she had a boyfriend. That's why I was stoked when she started dating Aaron. He treated my mom the way she deserved, and always bought her flowers and took her out to dinner. You can't imagine how excited I was when he proposed, and my mom said yes. I mean, I loved being a bridesmaid, and I'll never forget how beautiful my mom looked on her wedding day. But there was one problem, though. Aaron's son, Jared. He was so freaking gorgeous. It was as if he just came out of a movie. And Jared wasn't just good looking, he was also a really nice person. And even though he was a couple years older than me, he'd always say hi to me at school and carry my books when we walked home together. In fact, Jared was that guy. You know, the one boy in school everyone likes. That's why, after me and my mom moved into his house, all my friends got super jealous of me because I got to hang out with him all the time. My two best friends even tried to contact him on Facebook, but he just completely ignored them. So, of course, I had a huge crush on him. I mean, who wouldn't? But after a while, I began to think that he felt the same way about me. I mean, there was no other reason why he'd be so nice to me. But if he liked me, why wouldn't he tell me so? Well, I thought he was just too shy, and that's why I decided to make the first move. I waited until our parents left the house to go on a date night, and then I asked Jared if he wanted to watch a movie with me. He said yes, and we made some popcorn and sat down on the couch together. I don't remember what movie we watched, but as we ate the popcorn, our hands kept touching each other, and I knew I had to do something, so I just turned to him and kissed him. I can still remember his face and how shocked he looked. He immediately pushed me away, telling me to get off, and when I tried to explain that I thought he liked me, he laughed and said I was just a silly little girl. He also said he'd only been nice to me because his dad asked him to, but he'd never be interested in a 14-year-old girl like me. I didn't know what to say, so I just started crying and ran to my room. I've never felt more ashamed in my life, and I felt like I had ruined everything. Luckily for me, Jared didn't tell anyone what I'd done, but still, things were never the same between us. When we were on our own in the house, we both stayed in our rooms avoiding each other, and he even stopped saying hi to me at school. The worst part was that we lived in the same house, so I couldn't just avoid him. That's why every time I saw him, I remembered what an idiot I'd been. I wish I'd never tried to kiss my own stepbrother. Have you ever fallen in love with the wrong person? Tell us your story in the comments and share this video with all your friends.
Okay, most people won't believe the story, but it really did happen, and it was even in the news and everything. So, my mom always told me that I was too fat, even though I was one of the skinniest girls in my class. She said I had to become thinner if I wanted other people to like me, and she would weigh me every day after school and scream at me if I put on a pound. To make things worse, my mom always forced me to participate in beauty pageants because she wanted me to be the most beautiful and most perfect girl in the world. However, I hated it so much because I always came last. It was so embarrassing. But my mom believed that the reason I kept losing was because I was too fat. And that's why she stopped me from eating anything at home, and she even put a lock on the fridge. She literally tried to starve me, but it didn't work because I ended up just eating more inside my school cafeteria. When she realized that her plan wasn't working, she decided to do something terrible. One day I got home and my mom was standing there with a weird look on her face. She told me to close my eyes and swallow whatever she put into my mouth, or she would punish me worse than ever before. I knew that she wasn't joking, so although I had no idea what it was, I immediately swallowed it down. It tasted gross, but Mom gave me some more water and told me to go watch TV. I felt like puking, but I was too afraid of what Mom would do, so I held it down. A few weeks later, I was watching cartoons when my stomach started to ache. It was the worst pain I had ever felt, and I begged my mom to do something. But she just told me to stop being a baby. The pain got worse, though, when I kept on crying and moaning. My mom screamed at me to stop making so much noise, but I couldn't help it. In the end, it got so bad, I called the ambulance on my phone. I didn't care what my mom would do. I just wanted the pain to stop. When they arrived, Mom was super angry, but the ambulance drivers took one look at me and rushed me to the hospital. They immediately gave me a gastric lavage, and you won't believe what came out. The doctor had to reach into my throat to pull out one massive worm. It was at least as long as my arm. It was so horrifying that I still have nightmares about it. The doctors looked shocked and asked me what I had been eating. At first I was too afraid to say, but eventually I admitted that my mom had told me to close my eyes and swallow something without telling me what it was. Well, it turns out that my mom had fed me a tapeworm. She said she only wanted to help me lose weight, but now I know that she was nuts. I could have died because sometimes tapeworms go through your blood into your brain and kill you. I was only 12 when all this happened, and I haven't seen my mom since. To be honest, I don't ever want to see her again. Now I'm 18 and my mom is still in prison for what she did. After my mom was arrested, my aunt and uncle adopted me. I'm so lucky to have them. They don't care what weight I am. They love me for me. Hey, I'm Victoria, and I was only 14 when my whole life changed. It was a regular morning, and I was taking a shower before school, like I always did. After I was done, I used a towel to dry myself off. That's when I noticed that I was completely covered in hives. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal, but the hives got bigger, and my whole skin started to burn and itch. The pain got so bad that my mom drove me to the hospital. Unfortunately, the doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. Finally, after 3 days inside the hospital, they diagnosed me with aquagenic urticaria, which is a fancy way of saying water allergy. Technically, it's not an allergy, but then again, no one really knows what it is. And because only 1 in 200 million people have it, there aren't any scientists trying to find a cure. It really sucks. When I got my diagnosis, I became seriously depressed because I thought my life was over. I mean, what boy would ever want to date a girl that doesn't take showers? I wanted to cry, but I couldn't because even my own tears caused rashes on my face. Life felt so unfair. But when my mom saw how I was feeling, she bought me a book called Life Without Limits by Nick Vujicic. He was born without legs and arms, yet he managed to create an extraordinary life for himself. Reading his story encouraged me to stop complaining about things I can't change and instead to focus on things that are in my control. Like, I always dreamed of becoming a professional soccer player, but since I'm allergic to my own sweat, I had to give up on that dream. But instead of complaining how unfair the world is, I just chose a new career. Now I want to become a doctor and help other people, maybe even find a cure for an unusual condition like me. And I'm kinda lucky because where I live it always rains. That means that most of the time I can't leave my house, so I have plenty of time to study. Oh, and in case you were wondering how I clean myself, I actually take 1 cold shower once a week. Yeah, afterwards I'm covered in hives and rashes for the rest of the day, but at least I'm clean. So you don't need to feel sorry for me, because overall, I'm doing pretty fine, and there are plenty of people who have it much worse than me. I just wanted to share my story, and thank you for listening.
Hey, my name is Steven, and back in high school, I didn't have any friends. Most people thought I was boring because I didn't talk much, but actually, I was just shy and introverted. One day, my whole life changed. I noticed that my neighbor Thomas was struggling with his math exam. I kinda felt bad for him and gave him a small paper with all the correct answers so he wouldn't fail his exam. Then after class, he came over to me and said, "Thanks, Steven. You are a real lifesaver. And by the way, do you want to hang out with me and Alex over the weekend?" Of course, I said yes, because this was the first time I'd ever been invited to hang out with anyone. This was my chance to prove I wasn't as boring as everyone thought, and maybe I'd even make some friends. When I arrived at Thomas's house, he and Alex were already drinking beers. This was a big problem for me because I'd never drunk alcohol before. Then Thomas handed me a large glass of vodka, but I said I'd rather not drink any alcohol. "Don't be such a coward," Thomas responded. "Drink it or go home." I felt like I didn't have any choice. And one drink led to another, and soon I was totally wasted. After a few hours, Thomas said, "Hey, my brother is a tattoo artist, and he keeps his gear in the basement. We should all get matching tattoos." I was so drunk. I said, "Sure, that's an amazing idea." Then Thomas got the tattooing machine while I laid down on the couch and pulled up my sleeve, so Thomas could tattoo my arm. However, I was so drunk that I immediately passed out, and I don't remember anything that happened after that. When I woke up the next day, my face felt like it was burning. It was so painful. I went to find a mirror, and when I saw myself, I couldn't believe it. Those bastards had tattooed a Batman mask on my face. I stormed out of their house and went home, but of course everyone gave me weird looks, and I couldn't blame them because I looked ridiculous. I'll also never forget the look of horror on my mom's face when I got home. She screamed, "What have you done to your face?" I told her it was just a tattoo and I was going to get it removed, but she totally freaked out and started crying, saying my face was ruined forever. When my dad found out about what happened, he got really mad and promised me to sue Thomas and Alex and put them both into prison. I thought that was a great idea to get justice, but I still had one much bigger problem to solve. because the next day I had a really important exam at school, and there was no way I would go there and have everyone laugh at me and my stupid tattoo. Unfortunately, my dad said it was my own fault for being stupid enough to get a tattoo. So the next day, he drove me to school and practically dragged me into my class. It truly was the worst day of my life. Everyone, and I mean literally everyone, came up to me and laughed at my tattoo. My teacher even had to lock the door to our classroom, because every 5 minutes someone would open the door, take a look at me, and start laughing. What made it even worse was that everyone was treating Thomas and Alex like heroes for giving me that tattoo. By the time I sat down for my exam, I was a mess. I couldn't focus on anything. So I failed the exam so hard I was forced to repeat the year. Since then, I had laser treatment over the summer vacation, so I look a lot better now. But I still have some scars all over my face, and you can still see the faint outline of the Batman mask. Luckily, my dad helped me sue Thomas and Alex, and their families were forced to pay me $150,000 in compensation. And the best thing was that Thomas and Alex were sent to a youth detention center for 3 months. It would be great to say that something good came out of all this. I'd love to tell you that the girls at my school thought I was cool because I was crazy enough to get a Batman tattoo, but that wasn't the case. I was nothing but a huge joke. Not just in school, but in my whole town. Even now I can't leave my house without people pointing